And still, even that was not the wildest part. 19 days later, he scored his first senior goal and became the youngest goal scorer in Palmeiras history. 16 years old. Historic already. And suddenly the noise became impossible to contain. Now imagine being Real Madrid and watching that from afar. Imagine seeing a Brazilian striker with power, edge, personality, and ice in front of goal. A striker who was not just fast or flashy, but ruthless. A striker who did not play scared. A striker who seemed born for moments bigger than his age. Madrid had seen this movie before with Brazilian stars. They knew what it looked like when the right teenager arrived before the rest of Europe caught up. So they moved. And when Real Madrid move early, the entire football world pays attention. In December 2022, before Endrick had even become an adult, Madrid secured the deal. Around 72 million euros. For a teenager. Let that sink in. Clubs do not pay that for a child unless they believe they are buying the future. Not potential, the future. And suddenly the script got even heavier. He was no longer just Brazil's teenage monster. He was Real Madrid's investment. Real Madrid's next big Brazilian hope. Real Madrid's promise. That kind of transfer changes everything. It changes how people watch you. It changes how the media talk about you. It changes how every mistake feels. One bad touch is no longer just a bad touch. It becomes evidence. One quiet game becomes a debate. One missed chance becomes a headline. And remember, through all of this, Endrick was still a teenager. Too young for the pressure. Too young for the noise. Too young, maybe, for what football wanted from him. But football did not care. Then came Brazil. And with Brazil, the pressure became national. There are countries where a young star can grow slowly. Brazil is not one of them. In Brazil, if you are a wonder kid, people do not ask if you might become great one day. They ask whether you can save them now. Endrick got his senior debut in 2023. Suddenly, he was not just wearing yellow and highlight edits. He was living the dream for real. And still, the pressure only got worse, because now every touch was measured against the ghosts of Brazilian history. Pelé, Ronaldo, Romario, Ronaldinho, Neymar. That is not a list. That is a mountain. And yet Endrick kept climbing. Then came Wembley. And this is where the story starts feeling unreal. Brazil versus England. Endrick comes on in the second half. No long speech. No dramatic warm-up montage. Just a teenager entering one of football's most iconic stadiums. Then the chance comes. Vinicius Jr. is denied. The ball spills loose. Chaos for a split second. And Endrick is there. Of course he is there. He taps in, wheels away, drops to his knees, and history is made. Youngest men's international goal scorer at Wembley. At 17. But do not rush past that moment. Slow it down. Because this is where legends begin to sound possible. A Brazilian teenager, not even 18, scoring the winner against England at Wembley. That is not a normal coming-of-age scene. That is cinema. That is the kind of moment that tells the world the kid is not afraid of the stage. He does not just survive big occasions. He finds them. He feeds on them. And here is the deeper reason that goal mattered. It was not only about the record. It was the image, the feeling, the symbolism. Brazil did not just see a teenager score. They saw hope. They saw a new face stepping into a sacred role. The role of the Brazilian attacker who can shake a stadium with one touch. And for a football nation starved for a new icon, that is enough to set the imagination on fire. That is why Endrick's rise always felt larger than numbers. Still, the numbers are absurd. He became one of the youngest scorers in Brazil history. He became the youngest foreign player ever to score for Real Madrid in La Liga. He became the youngest Madridista to score in the European Cup. These are not random records. These are records at clubs and stadiums where history crushes people. Yet Endrick kept walking straight into it. And then came another scene that felt written by a screenwriter. His official Real Madrid debut at the Bernabeu. He comes on late. Replaces Kylian Mbappe. Just pause there. A Brazilian teenager stepping onto the Bernabeu turf for his official debut, replacing Mbappe. That alone sounds like fiction. But Endrick was not there to wave at the crowd. He was there to leave a mark. Within minutes, he scored. Powerful finish. Bedlam in the stadium. And with that one strike, he became the youngest foreigner to score for Real Madrid in La Liga history. Most young players would spend weeks trying to settle in. Endrick treated his debut like a warning shot. But here's where it gets even crazier. A few weeks later, on his Champions League debut, he scored again. Another record. Youngest Real Madrid player ever to score in the European Cup. Same pattern. New stage. Same ending. He kept arriving in football's biggest theaters and acting like he belonged there. That is when the comparisons really began to spiral. Because football does not stay calm when teenagers do this. It starts reaching for the biggest names it knows. Messi, Ronaldo, Mbappe, Haaland, Bellingham. The sport always wants to place a new prodigy on an old shelf. But Endrick is interesting because he does not feel like a copy of anyone. He carries the Brazilian chaos of instinct, but also the hunger of a pure striker. He can bulldoze through space, then finish with calm. He can play central, drift wide, press, run, fight. He is not a museum piece. He is a threat. And yet, just when the fairy tale looked ready to accelerate, reality hit. Because joining Real Madrid is one thing. Playing for Real Madrid is another. This is the part casual fans forget. At Madrid, talent does not guarantee minutes. The shirt is too heavy. The competition is too ruthless. One teenager can arrive as the future and still find himself staring at a bench full of monsters. Modric, Vinicius, Rodrigo, Mbappe, established stars, bigger reputations, more trust, more history. Suddenly the Wonder Kid was in the hardest classroom in football. And this is where Endrick's story becomes more than hype. Because the first year was difficult. He had the dream club. He had the iconic white shirt. He had the records. But he did not have rhythm. Not enough minutes. Not enough continuity. Not enough oxygen. For a player built on instinct and momentum, sitting and waiting can feel like suffocation. The kid who had spent his life forcing doors open was suddenly being told to wait. That can break young players. It breaks a lot of them. The talent stays, but the belief gets cloudy. The timing goes. The confidence cracks. And Endrick was honest about it. He struggled. He needed help. He needed perspective. That is why one detail from this chapter says so much. Jude Bellingham kept calling him. When Endrick was having a hard time, Bellingham would check on him, talk to him, keep him steady. In a club full of stars, that matters. Because even heroes need someone to remind them they are not alone. But the clock was ticking. In football, patience sounds noble until the World Cup starts getting closer. Endrick did not just need development. He needed evidence. He needed minutes. He needed to show Brazil he was more than an idea. So in 2026, he made a choice that might define his whole career. He left Madrid temporarily and went to Lyon on loan. And for a player carrying that much hype, loan moves can feel dangerous. They can look like demotions. They can smell like doubt. But Endrick did not hide from it. He embraced it. He later called it one of the best decisions of his life. And you can see why. In France, he got what every young striker needs more than anything: repetition. Games, touches, chances, responsibility. He started scoring again, creating again, breathing again. In just 19 appearances across League, Cup, and Europe, he directly contributed to 15 goals. Suddenly the kid everyone thought might be fading at Madrid was alive again, flying again, attacking defenders again. The spark was back. This part matters because it changes the whole meaning of the story. Endrick is not just a wonder kid who breaks records when life is perfect. He is a young star who got hit by pressure, stalled in the biggest club in the world, then found the courage to take a step sideways so he could keep moving forward. That is not weakness. That is maturity. That is the kind of decision future greats make before everybody else understands why. And Brazil noticed. Of course they noticed. Every goal in Lyon felt like a message. Every assist felt like a reminder. You thought the story had slowed down? You thought the hype had been too early? Watch again. This is still him. This is still the kid from Taguatinga. Still the left foot. Still the aggression. Still the refusal to disappear. By the time the 2026 World Cup conversation heated up, Endrick was back in the frame. Not as a guaranteed savior. Not as a finished superstar. But as something maybe even more dangerous. A weapon. The kind of player you bring into a dead game when the energy is gone and the fear has set in. The kind of striker who can flip a stadium in 5 minutes. Even now, at 19, he is still fighting for every minute, still battling for trust, still carrying that same old villain on his back. Expectation. Too much, too early. It never fully leaves him. And maybe that is why he feels so magnetic. Because Endrick's story is not clean. It is not a straight line from child prodigy to global king. It is messier than that, harder than that, more human than that. It is a poor kid with a gift, a teenager with impossible hype, a striker chased by history before he became a man, a Real Madrid dream mixed with bench frustration, a lone move that looked risky and became a revival, a kid who keeps hearing the world say, now, do it now, and somehow keeps answering. That is the movie, not just the goals. Not just the records, the resistance to poverty, the resistance to pressure, the resistance to being turned into a myth before he had time to become a player, the resistance to doubt when the minutes disappeared, the resistance to fear when the whole country kept waiting for a miracle. That is what makes Endrick feel bigger than a prospect. He is not only fighting defenders. He is fighting the speed at which football tries to consume its chosen ones. And still, the achievements are already ridiculous. By 19, he has lifted trophies with Palmeiras, scored historic goals for Brazil, broken age records at Wembley, broken age records at Real Madrid in La Liga and the Champions League, worn the white shirt, survived the bench, rebuilt himself in France, forced his way back into the biggest conversations. Most players would take a decade to build a resume that dramatic. Endrick did it before leaving his teens. So now the question changes. It is no longer, who is Endrick? We know the answer to that. He is the wonder kid, the chosen one, the poor kid who turned YouTube clips into a Real Madrid contract, the teenager who made Wembley kneel, the striker who refuses to stop swinging. 17 years old, Wembley Stadium, Brazil on one side, England on the other. The game is tight, the crowd is roaring, and a kid who still looks too young for all of this comes off the bench and scores the winner. Not just any winner, the kind of goal that instantly drags your name into history. The youngest male player ever to score an international goal at Wembley. And that was only one chapter, because a few months later, the same kid walked into Real Madrid, scored on his La Liga debut, then scored on his Champions League debut, and started smashing records that used to belong to names like Roll. His name is Endrick. And the scary part? The real story was only beginning. Because when football starts whispering about a teenager this loudly, it usually means one of two things. Either the hype is fake, or the player is about to become something the sport cannot control. And with Endrick, the noise was unreal. Brazil called him the future. Europe hunted him before he was even old enough to move. Real Madrid locked him down before he turned 18. And every time he touched the ball, people were not asking if he was good. They were asking if he was the next one, the next Brazilian superstar, the next number 9, the next phenomenon. And that is where the danger begins. Because talent is one thing. Expectation is something else entirely. Endrick was not just a wonder kid. He was a child carrying adult pressure. Before he could legally sign with Europe, he was already being judged like a Finnish superstar. Before he could even grow into his body, he was being compared to Ronaldo, to Romario, to the greatest strikers Brazil has ever produced. Think about that for a second. Most kids at that age are worried about school, friends, and what comes next. Endrick was being asked to carry the future of an entire football nation. And that pressure did not begin at the Bernabeu. It began far away from the lights, far away from the cameras, in Taguatinga, near Brasilia, where the dream did not look glamorous. It looked desperate. It looked fragile. It looked like a family trying to survive. Endrick's childhood was marked by serious poverty, the kind that makes football feel less like a game and more like an escape route. For some kids, football is a hobby. For Endrick, it was oxygen. That is why his story hits differently. He did not grow up chasing luxury. He grew up chasing a way out. His father believed so deeply in his son's gift that he started uploading videos of Endrick scoring goals online, hoping someone, somewhere, would notice. Just picture that. A father filming his little boy, posting clips into the digital void, not for attention, not for fun, but because this was the plan. This was the shot. This was the family's lifeline. And somehow it worked. But here's where the story gets cinematic. Endrick was not one of those kids who slowly became good. He exploded. From a very young age, people around him realized this was not normal. The left foot, the acceleration, the power, the instinct, the way he attacked defenders like he had seen the ending already. By the time Palmeiras brought him into their system at 11, he was no longer just a talented boy. He was becoming a phenomenon in motion. And Palmeiras did more than give him a badge. They gave his family stability. They gave his father a job. They helped make the dream physically possible. That matters, because football stories are often told like destiny. But destiny usually needs help. It needs one club to say yes, one adult to believe, one door to open at the exact right time. Palmeiras opened that door. And once Endrick stepped through it, he did not walk. He sprinted. What happened next sounded almost fake. Goal after goal after goal. At youth level, he piled up well over 160 goals for Palmeiras. Read that again. Over 160 goals. Not in some fantasy mode. Not on a video game. In real life. The numbers were so ridiculous that people started talking about him before he was even close to the first team. This was not normal academy hype. This was Brazil doing what Brazil only does for the rarest young attackers. Turning a teenager into a national obsession. And Brazil can be beautiful when it loves you, but it can be brutal when it expects too much from you. That was always the villain in Endrick's story. Not a defender, not a coach, not even a rival club. The villain was expectation, the kind that arrives too early and stays too long. The kind that tells a kid, you are not allowed to develop. You must already be legendary. Endrick himself admitted he would rather have had much less attention. Imagine how honest that is. The whole world screaming your name, and all you can think is, I wish it were quieter. But maybe that is what makes him so compelling. He never looked like someone enjoying the circus. He looked like someone trying to survive it. Quiet, grounded, serious, almost older than his age. Teammates and coaches kept noticing the same thing. His focus was extreme. His competitiveness was intense. There was a story from his youth days where even after a high-scoring game, what stuck with people was not the goals. It was how angry he was about losing. That tells you everything. Some kids enjoy highlights. Endrick hates losing. And those are two very different mentalities. Then came the moment when the dream stopped being theory. October 2022, Palmeiras' first team. Endrick made his senior debut at just 16, becoming the youngest player ever to appear for the club. The real question now is far more dangerous. How far can this go? Can he return to Madrid and turn flashes into dominance? Can he become Brazil's next great number 9? Can he turn World Cup pressure into World Cup glory? Can he grow from record-breaking teenager into Ballon d'Or contender? Can he become the kind of player who is not just compared to Ronaldo, but forces the next generation to be compared to him? Because if this is what Endrick looks like before his prime, before his body is fully developed, before the game truly slows down for him, then football might not be watching a promising kid anymore. It might be watching the opening scenes of its next superstar. And if that is true, then one terrifying question remains. Is Endrick just destroying records? Or is he about to destroy the limit of what we thought a teenager could become?